Thank you, Dr. Sultan, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. First, a big thank you to our Danish hosts for their welcome and also for inviting a scientific contribution to the Copenhagen Climate Ministerial. Now, the IPCC approved the final report of its sixth cycle, the synthesis report, almost exactly a year ago in Interlaken in Switzerland. And as IPCC chair for the seventh assessment cycle, I have to stress that while the findings of that report stand the test of time, our climate has moved on, as Minister Babayev has pointed out. And as confirmed by the World Meteorological Organization, 2023 was the hottest year on record, with particularly startling extremes in ocean temperatures. Extreme weather events and wildfires ceased to be part of future projections. They were evident on our television screens, and for far too many of us were a present reality. And sea levels continue to rise relentlessly, with consequences for small island states and low-lying coastal communities. And all of this, as we have demonstrated, is down to more than a century of human activities, including burning fossil fuels and unequal and unsustainable patterns of energy and land use. Now, our latest report showed that with every increment of warming, the world will become more and more dangerous. Beyond 1.5 degrees warming, we will see new risks emerging associated with sea level rise, permafrost degradation, biodiversity loss, water scarcity, more extreme weather, and food insecurity. But on the policy front, obviously, we have encouraging signs of progress, and I would like to congratulate Dr. Sultan and the COP20 presidency for the progress that was made. The UAE consensus has made a start on the challenge of transitioning away from fossil fuels. It established a new framework for the global goal on adaptation and operationalized the Loss and Damage Fund. But IPCC findings need to be interpreted in the light of all that's happened in the last 12 months. And that's what I'd like to do in just the next few minutes. And I will do it with reference to the three goals of the Paris Agreement and indeed the sessions at this climate ministerial. First, on mitigation, ambition and warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. In IPCC, we've been saying for more than 5 years now that only immediate and deep emission reductions will allow global warming to be limited to 1.5 degrees. And we can't go on saying that forever. Indeed, the last UNEP GAP report was entitled Broken Record. I looked back at the media release from the special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees, and I was quoted as saying that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees is possible within the laws of chemistry and physics. And I can still stand by that statement, noting that this refers to the long-run average level of warming, not to the single year like the one we've just seen. But it's also clear what would need to happen. Once emitted, carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for centuries. It's the accumulation of emissions that matters. And in the middle range of the scenarios we have assessed, greenhouse gas emissions peak before 2025, they fall by 43% by 2030, 60% by 2035, 69% by 2040, and reach net zero roughly around the middle of the century. We can't just pick a single year. We have to follow the pathway. If we don't act now, we close the option of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees, as we will have used up the available carbon budget around the end of this decade, even with the current set of nationally determined contributions. But we've also shown that this is possible. In literally hundreds of pages, we've set out specifically what can be done in terms of energy supply, energy demand, transportation, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, both through technology and patterns of human behavior. And most of these actions also yield wider co-benefits. They can make contributions, positive contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals and contribute to a just transition. And we do have the tools. we have shown that carbon pricing, regulations and other interventions have already resulted in gigatons of avoided emissions, and much more can be achieved if policies and measures are scaled up and deployed more widely. Second, let me turn to adaptation and resilience. And adaptation action has increased, but the progress is uneven. We are not adapting fast enough. Most observed adaptation is fragmented, small in scale, incremental, sector-specific, and focused more on planning than implementation. Hard limits to adaptation, as well as soft limits caused by lack of resources and institutional capacity, are being reached in some sectors and regions. Maladaptation actions, which bring short-term gains but are detrimental in the long run, are also increasing and are disproportionately affecting vulnerable groups. The increasing gaps between adaptation action taken and what's needed are largest among lower income populations, and at the current rate of planning and implementation, adaptation gaps can only continue to grow. And third, on finance and means of implementation, there are manifest gaps between tracked climate finance and what is needed to put us on a low emissions and climate resilient development pathway. Only between 4 and 8% of tracked climate finance is allocated to adaptation, and more than 90% of adaptation finance comes from public sources. Adaptation finance gaps are constraining implementation of adaptation options, especially in developing countries. Increasing public and private finance flows by billions of dollars per year, increasing direct access to multilateral funds, strengthening project pipeline development, and shifting finance from readiness activities to project implementation can enhance adaptation. And projects that yield joint mitigation and adaptation benefits are a potential source of private finance. And meanwhile, though the gaps are narrower, tracked climate finance for mitigation is still a factor of 3 to 6 below what would be required to put us on a 1.5 or 2 degrees pathway. The gaps are actually least for energy supply, notably electricity generation, but greater for energy efficiency, transport and land use measures. And for mitigation, reducing risks and leveraging private flows through public guarantees, local capital market development, and building greater trust in international cooperation have a role to play. Now, finally, what can be expected of IPCC during the coming 7th assessment cycle, which began just 8 months ago? Now, due to our rigorous science-based processes, it's going to be some time before new reports are available. The panel met in Istanbul in January, and thanks to our Turkish hosts, and agreed on the content of our programme of work, though the detailed timeline needs further discussion. By early 2027, we should release a special report on cities and climate change, and the work on that is already underway. By the end of 2027, we should have a methodology report on carbon dioxide removal technologies and carbon capture, utilisation and storage, which will inform the submission of national inventories. And during 2028, the working group co-chairs hope to have finalised 3 working group reports, followed by a synthesis report in 2029. There's also going to be an update and revision of technical guidelines on impacts and adaptation, which were last produced in 1994, a very long time ago. This will be published alongside the Working Group 2 reports on impacts, adaptation and vulnerability, and the updated guidelines will cover adaptation indicators, metrics and methodologies. And our sincere hope is that this supports the global goal on adaptation and may be indeed help to underpin greater financial flows for adaptation. So to sum it all up, the scale and pace of climate change poses unprecedented challenges for humanity. But IPCC's recent work has shown that we have the means and the tools to address these challenges if we choose to use them. And just to say, the newly elected scientific leadership of IPCC stands ready to play its part in supporting a move from problems to solutions and from analysis to action. Thank you.